Rock stars in the 1970s had money pouring in and plenty of wild ideas about how to spend it. From private islands to chimpanzees and flower budgets bigger than most mortgages. These outrageous buys show just how over the top things really got. Elvis Presley.
Her lips have made me a prisoner, a slave to her ever.
Elvis Presley was the king in more ways than one, and by the 1970s, his taste for luxury was every bit as famous as his music. We all remember the rhinestone jumpsuits, the big sideburns, and those unforgettable concerts in Vegas. But Elvis didn't just want to travel like a star, he wanted to soar above the clouds in style. In 1975, Elvis bought a Convair 880 jet for about $250,000, and then he poured more than $500,000 more into customizing it to his liking. He named the jet the Lisa Marie after his daughter, and it was about as over the top as you can imagine. Inside, there were gold-plated seatbelts, leather chairs, of course, a conference room, and even a bedroom. Because, of course, you're Elvis, a regular plane seat just won't do. The bathrooms had gold fixtures, the lighting was mood-controlled, and every detail screamed extravagance. I mean, we all had to save up every penny to buy our first car. Meanwhile, Elvis was basically building a fly-in Graceland. And the king, well, he loved that plane. He used it to fly to concerts, to movie sets, and even spur-of-the-moment trips with friends. Fans would line up just to catch a glimpse of it on the runway, and it became almost as iconic as his pink Cadillac from the 1950s. Even after his passing, the Lisa Marie plane has lived on as part of the Graceland tour, letting fans peek inside Elvis's mile-high palace. For most of us, a jet like that is nothing but a dream, but Elvis had the money and the flair to make that dream a reality. And please, if you've been to Graceland, if you've done the tour, if you've seen the inside of this plane, get down in the comments section and tell me your thoughts. What the heck did it look like? Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac was one of those bands you couldn't escape in the 70s. Rumors was everywhere, on the radio, at parties, blasting out of every record shop in town. But what many folks didn't realize at the time was that behind all that beautiful harmony, the band had a serious problem with the white stuff. They went through so much of it that people say they actually set aside part of the studio budget just to keep the supply a-coming. Mick Fleetwood was so notorious for his appetite that people joked he could have built a mansion out of the money he spent on the drug. And when you listen to those recordings, the intensity, the energy, yeah, you can almost hear how wound up they all were. Of course, all that excess came with a price. Frayed relationships, near disasters, and bank accounts that looked emptier than you'd expect for a band selling millions of records. We actually cover the monetary woes of Peter Green in another video, so check that one out next. That's a whole other can of worms, but man, Mick Fleetwood. You would think, man, these folks sound like they're living the dream. But really, they were burning through fortunes faster than most of us could balance a checkbook. And yeah, we learned how to do that, back when home ec still existed, and back when checkbooks did too. Michael Jackson. MJ was already larger than life by the late 70s, and with that fame came a taste for the unusual. While some stars were buying mansions or cars or planes, Michael was filling his home with exotic pets. He started off normally, with snakes and birds, but it was his chimpanzee Bubbles that really became part of the family. And caring for an animal like that, of course, wasn't cheap. Between handlers, special food, and living arrangements, the bills ran sky high. But Michael loved surrounding himself with these creatures, and it gave him the sense of wonder he always chased. Of course, that was only one piece of his wild spending habits. He was known for marathon shopping trips, where he'd sweep through entire stores, dropping small fortunes on antiques, costumes, and random curiosities. Stories of him spending millions in just one spree are no exaggeration. Michael Jackson treated shopping like an event. almost like putting on another performance. And while most of us thought carefully about every single dollar, Michael could casually spend what it would take us a lifetime to save. And then there was the crown jewel of his financial decisions: buying the Beatles song catalog in the 1980s. That move not only shocked fans, but even soured his friendship with Paul McCartney. And looking back, you can see the roots of that freewheeling attitude in the late 70s, when he was already living like money would never run out. Between his exotic pets, the over-the-top shopping binges, and those high-stakes business moves, Michael's spending showed a side of him that was every bit as extravagant as his performances on stage. Elton John.
I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to fight.
Elton John. Now there's a name nobody could forget. We all remember him for those glittery glasses, feathered outfits, and songs that lit up the radio all throughout the 70s. But behind the sequins and piano pounding, Elton had a little spending habit that might just take the cake, or should I say the bouquet. Because at the height of his fame, he was dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on flowers alone, once admitting to spending close to $400K in under 2 years just to keep the fresh blooms around him. He once actually explained that it was kind of a therapy, saying he simply couldn't stand to wake up in a room without fresh flowers.
Still standing better than I ever did, looking like a true.
Now, I don't know about you, but I was happy if the petunias in the yard survived the summer. Elton John had whole homes that looked like indoor gardens, as though the Chelsea Flower Show had moved in permanently. And this was not his only wild splurge. His shopping binges were so legendary they included things like an actual tram from Australia. Looking back, it's almost funny. While we were busy clipping coupons at the grocery store, Elton was practically keeping the world's florist in business all by himself. Rod Stewart.
You want my body and you think I'm sexy. Come on, sugar, let me know.
Rod Stewart was about as big as it got in the 1970s. That raspy voice, the wild hair, the flashy clothes, he had it all. But while most rock stars were out buying Ferraris or throwing wild parties, Rod was sinking crazy amounts of money into model trains. Did I read that right? Yeah, model trains. And no, I don't mean that little loop of a track around the Christmas tree. Mr. Rod Stewart had a setup the size of a ballroom, with cities and stations so detailed they looked like something out of a movie.
We should give thanks and pray to the one.
The guy would spend hours working on it, laying track, painting buildings, adding little trees and lampposts, just completely lost in his own miniature world. People joked he could have bought a real train for what he spent on his models, and no, they're not wrong. But Rod's super proud of it, and honestly, I think it's kinda cool. You can see the joy in his face when he talked about it. Here was this huge rock star, known for strutting around stadiums, and in his downtime, he just wanted to play trains like a kid who never grew up. Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was the biggest band in the world by the mid-70s, and they wanted to travel in a way that matched their larger-than-life reputation. So, instead of cramming into commercial flights, they leased a Boeing 720 that became known as the Starship. And calling it a plane feels like an understatement of the century. It was more like a flying palace. It had a bar, a lounge with an electric organ, private bedrooms, even a fireplace. Well, a fake one, but still. The whole thing made your average first-class cabin look like the back of a school bus. Those dollar signs got bigger and bigger when you throw around numbers like $30K to hire it for a tour, $200K to rearrange it, and add some of those fancy amenities. But for Zeppelin, it was worth it. It gave them the freedom to hop city to city on their tours without all the hassle. And it was outfitted exactly the way they wanted. Imagine it, shag carpeting, velvet seats, mirrored walls, basically Studio 54 with wings. They could throw parties in the sky, hold meetings, or just kick back like royalty while flying to the next sold-out stadium. Even other huge artists like Elton John and the Rolling Stones would also take Starship for a spin. But it was Zeppelin who made it famous. and the sight of that huge jet sitting on the tarmac became a symbol of rock excess in the 1970s. Proof that these bands weren't just musicians, they were empires. Looking back, it's wild to think a single plane could sum up an entire decade's mix of glamour, indulgence, and unstoppable ambition. The Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones were always known for doing things their own way, and in the 1970s, that even extended to how they recorded their music. Most bands had to fork over some serious cash to big-name studios, but the Stones figured, why keep paying when you can just build your own? And so they poured so much money into creating a mobile recording studio inside of a massive truck. At first glance, it just looked like another one of those crazy rockstar splurges, but in reality, it turned out to be a very clever investment. That truck, it saved them a fortune over time, since they could drag it along wherever inspiration struck. They used it for sessions on Exile on Main Street, and before long, other major bands wanted in. We're talking Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and even Bob Marley ended up using the Rolling Stones' mobile setup to cut tracks. What started out as the Stones trying to dodge studio costs ended up having this huge ripple effect. Kinda shaping the sound of the decade and giving artists a freedom they never had before. Looking back, it might not be as flashy as a gold-plated jet or a mansion filled with exotic decor, but it was one of the smartest splurges a band has ever made. The mobile studio became legendary in its own right, proof that sometimes the most extravagant sounding purchases can actually pay off big time. Only the Stones could turn a giant truck into one of the most influential pieces of recording gear in rock history. Tom Petty. This one's a cool one with one twist after another, because Tom Petty was never the type to just roll over when it came to his music. By the late 70s, he already had a couple of solid albums under his belt, but when his label, Shelter Records, got swallowed up by MCA, he was not happy about being treated like a pawn in the shuffle. Petty wasn't being petty, but he wanted to renegotiate, and when MCA just flat out refused, well, he took the ultimate gamble. He put his money where his mouth was. He poured more than $500,000 of his own cash into recording his next album, and then he flat out refused to hand it over. To break free, he did the unthinkable. He filed for bankruptcy, forcing the label to void his old deal. And that gamble paid off. Once the dust settled, Petty signed a new contract under terms that were actually fair to him. And the album he fought so hard for, a multi-platinum triumph. Are we even surprised with winners like Don't Do Me Like That and Refugee? For Petty, it wasn't just about money. It was about control over his own music, and he proved that sometimes you have to risk everything to protect your art.
What if I love you, baby? Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that.
And his battles with the industry didn't really stop there. A few years later, MCA tried to slap a higher price tag on his next album, Hard Promises. They wanted to sell it for $1 more than the standard album price. I'm pretty sure there's even a term for that, superstar pricing. These days, we might call it price gouging. The change might not sound like much, but Tom Petty was straight up furious. It felt like his fans were getting squeezed, and, well, yeah, they were. So Tom pushed back hard, even threatening to rename the album $8.98 to highlight the issue. And in the end, MCA backed down, and the album came out at the usual price. But that fight showed exactly who Tom Petty was. Not just a rock star, but a guy who cared about the people buying his records. John Lennon.
Imagine all the people.
As you can imagine, John Lennon was never one to live a simple life. And by the 1970s, he was pouring his fortune into all sorts of unusual ventures. One of the strangest came in 1967, when he bought Beatle Island, a little stretch of land off the coast of Ireland. He bought it for the equivalent of about $2,291. Wow. Most folks would pick up a vacation home or maybe a sports car, but Lennon wanted his own private island. It was windswept, rocky, and not exactly the most practical spot. But that was John, always chasing something different.
Darling, darling, stand by me.
And while that's not the highest price tag we've seen on this list, apparently just before his death, Lennon was making plans to retire there and was going to launch a construction project on the island, which you have to imagine would be a logistical and monetary burden. Actually, before that, instead of building a retreat for himself, he had let a group of hippies kind of move in during the early 70s, turning it into a full-on commune. They grew their own food, raised kids, and tried to live off the land, even as the harsh Irish weather made it pretty tough to survive. Locals nicknamed the place Beatle Island, and for a while it was a little utopian experiment supported by Lennon's money. The commune would fizzle out after a fire destroyed the supply tent, but the story stuck around as one of Lennon's most curious legacies.
Woman, I know you understand.
I always thought that story summed him up perfectly. While other rock stars were blowing money on gold toilets and flashy cars, Lennon was buying an island and handing it over to hippies. Even today, people talk about that little patch of land in Clue Bay like it's a piece of Beatles history, which, in a way, it was. Cher.
If I could turn back time, if I could.
Now, Cher has always been larger than life, whether it was on stage with Sonny belting out "I Got You Babe," or dazzling us with those outrageous Bob Mackie gowns. So it's no surprise that in the 1970s, when she set out to build her dream home, she went all in on the drama. Forget a cozy bungalow or a simple California ranch. Cher created a mansion that looked like part castle, part Vegas showpiece. We're talking indoor gardens that Elton John would have loved, Gothic-style furniture, and Egyptian-inspired rooms that felt more like museum exhibits than living spaces. The place became a reflection of her unique style, extravagant and theatrical from top to bottom. She filled it with heavy carved doors, dark wood accents, and elaborate stonework that gave it this moody Gothic flair. But she also added exotic touches, like statues and art that made you feel like you had wandered into some kind of ancient temple. It was equal parts glamorous, eccentric, and completely over the top. Exactly what you'd expect from Cher at the height of her superstardom. Looking back, it makes sense. While most of us were trying to decorate with shag carpets and avocado-colored appliances, Cher was building herself a palace that looked like something out of a fantasy movie. She did not just want a house, she wanted an experience every time she walked through the front door. And honestly, you have to admire her for that. If anyone could pull off living in a home that felt like a Gothic garden party crossed with ancient Egypt, yeah, it was Cher. Alright, the 1970s gave us unforgettable music, but man, the spending sprees were just as memorable. From Elvis's Flying Palace to Cher's Gothic Mansion. It's kind of amazing how much money turned into some of the most bizarre and fascinating purchases in rock history. So now we want to hear from you, the fans. Which one of these wild purchases was the craziest? Did I forget a story about a 1970s musician who bought something crazy or stupid or wild? Well, get down in the comment section and tell me what. Also, if you have been to Graceland, what was it like? After all, we here at Do You Remember are nothing without you. We love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that little thumbs up icon. It actually helps our channel a ton. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a memory. From my entire team here at Do You Remember, I'm Nostalgic Nick, signing off. No gold-plated seatbelt required.